Right. Finally, the one on the list is the Groovy supports. There are quite a few suggestions that have been presented to us from the Groovy team, and like base script classes, more customizable bindings, but also more extensive ideas like having Groovy scripts, giving Groovy scripts included access to Spring Beans by name, inspired by the way that we are doing it in the Spring expression language, in the Spring 3.0 expression language. So there are several ideas that we're trying to research, and I expect these three at least to make M2. There are several further ideas in this space. The Groovy-based bean builder that the Grails web framework has is a candidate for inclusion or for migration to Spring Core, because the functionality there is actually clean and not web specific, and would be a good candidate for Spring's own set of configuration options. And another idea that we are researching at the moment is the use of Groovy for template files. Just as a use case, think about email templates being expressed in the form of a Groovy-based template instead of, say, Velocity, which you may use today. So there are several ideas in the Groovy space, and provided that the timing works out, at least a selection of those here will actually make 3.1 and 2. Finally, as a final note, Spring 3.1, of course, is not a self-contained effort. It's a foundation for many projects in the Spring portfolio, not least of it all Spring Mobile, Spring Social, Spring Android, all of them pretty new projects, and all of them Spring 3.1 based for their first production releases. The Greenhouse sample application is a more recent effort of ours. It's also catching up with Spring 3.1 already and making some good use of Spring 3.1 environment features and more. So it's going to provide a good reference sample application for Spring 3.1. And some of the features even that we have been talking about here, but also some that we have not been talking about, like the request interceptor facility for a REST template, they have been inspired by the needs of those other Spring projects of Spring Mobile, of Spring Social. So there is, of course, also inspiration that we in the Spring Framework team get from other Spring portfolio projects from other parts, other sides of Spring source. All right. So in Spring 3.1, we really provide a selection of improvements to the Spring 3.0 programming model. Basically, we take Spring 3.0 as is, and we just refine it in several corners, and we extend it with significant new functionality as well. So EM1, which is basically out tomorrow, but if you pick up the latest snapshots, you'll basically get exactly what we're talking about here already. The first milestone contains the whole environment profile, the environment abstraction, the Java-based app config, app feature methods, and so forth, the cache abstraction, and the C namespace. All of this is available in M1. And as I already discussed in a separate section, more extensive work is being done in other areas still, where we decided not to release them in M1 yet. The whole MVC processing, next generation web application side of things, the Server 3.0 support, and the Groovy support are still in the R&D phase, and expect to deliver results for 3.1 and 2 in April. So wrapping this up with the release plan, 3.1 M1 is scheduled for February. It's actually scheduled for release tomorrow, and 3.1 M2 is scheduled to follow in April. We only expect there to be 2 milestones. So right after M2, we are trying to go straight to a first release candidate and expect the 3.1 feature set to become generally available in June this year. So this is basically the Spring 3.1 plan as it stands right now. thank you for your attention. It was a pleasure to introduce this release to you. Check out the M1 release as it is being published tomorrow, and let us know what the new features do to you, or what you can do to those new features. We'd really like to have your feedback in order to make Servlet 1 final, the smoothest possible release with these key themes that we have been setting here. We have a few remaining minutes for Q&A now. There was a question about application server compatibility with Spring Servlet 1. I haven't been very explicit about it, but fundamentally, it's the same story as with Spring Servlet 0. We support, we require Java 5 and higher, Java SE 5 and higher, J2EE 1.4 and higher, have explicit support, of course, for Java EE 5 and Java EE 6. So translated to common server products, that means you could use WebSphere 6.1 or higher. So we do support WebSphere 6.1 still for the entire Spring Servlet X line, and of course any new application servers. So we certainly, if you are free to choose, we would certainly recommend to use recent generations of application servers, such as Tomcat 7, for example. But of course, WebSphere 6.1 is an important server found out there in the installed base. Any other Java EE compliant application server, WebLogic 10 and higher, and so forth, even WebLogic 9 still, would of course be a good runtime environment, a good server environment to run the Spring-based application on as well. There is a question: what is the planned speed of releases after 3.1, which we always try to have a plan for the generation after the next one already. So when we went out with 3.0, we knew that there would be a 3.1, and we had a plan for the major themes. The timeline is, of course, harder to really predict that from. From this perspective, I can only really give you a good estimate. There will be a Spring 3.2 release. Our main inspiration for 3.2 will be Java SE 7, which is going to be released in Q3 this year, or at least it's planned to. So as long as that plan is accurate, and we'll have a JDK 7 in the second half of this year, or in Q4 this year. Spring 3.2 has some plans for exposing Java 7 specific functionality in a Spring-style way. So if you have the opportunity to upgrade to Java 7, then do track our Spring 3.2 effort. The timeline would roughly suggest that Spring 3.2 definitely would have a milestone this year still, maybe even two. I would estimate Spring 3.2 GA for early next year. From this perspective onwards, this is roughly the plan. At the moment, we're trying to deliver one major release per year, basically. So after 3.2, I could certainly imagine this to be the case for further 3.x releases as well. Just one note at this point: lots of the R&D efforts that we do here at SpringSource is at this point also showing in other projects, not just in Spring Framework itself. So do make sure that you're not only following what Spring Framework itself does, but also what's happening around Spring Framework, from Spring Mobile, Spring Social, to recent releases in, for example, Spring Integration and Groovy. There are lots of interesting things happening around and on top of Spring Framework. And I also expect this to continue in the course of the next few years, basically. Spring Framework will evolve as outlined, for example, with Java 7 as a basis, as an inspiration. But fundamentally, it will also continue to serve as a foundation for other projects that make the best possible use of Spring Framework foundational features on top. So definitely check out other Spring Portfolio projects as well. There is a question on Android development. Spring Android really is a bit of a special case, and we don't have the opportunity to go into detail there, but the Spring Android is just approaching, really stable releases really, So do make sure that you're tracking Spring Android on its homepage and in possible upcoming blog posts. Caching coming up here. Well, caching in 3.1, whether it would support incremental caching, or caches being pre-populated at the application startup. This is certainly all within reach, or within the set of features that we envision. But fundamentally, Spring's own support is about abstracting cache API types and about abstracting cache interaction. So any more sophisticated features are typically to be found in the actual backend provider. And in Spring, we're not trying to abstract the backend provider too much, just interaction with it. But we would like to expose the raw power, the native functionality of the backend caching provider that you're using. We would like to expose it basically without any restrictions. And this kind of feature is really probably to be found in native provider setup, not in Spring's own abstraction. There is a question on the session attribute store for Windows sessions. So this idea of having specific support for a Windows session, a window identifier. The prototype, or the idea for integrating this with Spring MVC is indeed a custom session attribute store implementation as an alternative to the default session attribute store that Spring MVC typically uses, which just stores attributes into the standard HTTP session. So it indeed is a custom session attribute store. So if you already happen to have custom session attribute stores, they wouldn't naturally participate in window management. They wouldn't conflict either, though. So there's certainly no conflict hiding there. But if you'd like a custom session attribute store to benefit from window management, you would have to adapt your custom session attribute store implementation a bit, making it call into the Spring-provided window context APIs, finding out the current Windows session and reacting to it, basically. So it certainly is possible to get the best of both worlds, even if you happen to have custom session attribute stores already. I have a question on conversations, whether they basically how they relate to the CDI scoping of these, the GSR 299 idea of conversation scope. This is certainly related. So in terms of the idea of conversation management in the Spring world, I would expect the concepts to translate quite well to the CDI world and vice versa. In terms of the functional scope, it's quite independent and actually significantly richer than the conversation model in GSR 299. However, if you know the conversation model in GSR 299 in CDI, you'll certainly be able to translate this know-how to Spring's own conversation support in a quite direct fashion. If there are any further questions, feel free to go to our forum and to discuss the webinar, the content, some of the things that maybe I haven't covered, to discuss some of those in the Spring Core Forum. I'd also like to remind you once again that there is a series of blog posts coming. So the blog posts will go into a bit more detail and will also provide an opportunity to discuss those features in the comments to those blog posts, of course. There's one last one that I had here. The common question is profile activation, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to exactly point to this series of blog posts. The details of how you would activate a specific profile, how you would define custom profiles, custom rules of choosing active profiles, all of this will become clearer, more obvious, hopefully, in this series of blog posts that is starting next week. So stay tuned on blog.springsource.com. Thanks.